because
That's unbelievable.
I was in Bakersfield doing a portrait of me. He invited me onto the bus, and it literally.
Smoke your pot.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I had smoked pot for years, but he passed the joint around twice, and I was so freaking stoned that I just didn't know what to say. So I walked outside and literally walked over to a flower bed and fell over in the parking lot. And I prided my, I was proud of like my lung abilities up until that point. And anyway, I'm incriminating myself, but I do not imbibe anyway. Okay. All right, ready?
Are you ready?
Are you doing it or are you just starting?
No,
You doing the whole thing?
Then it's gone, man.
Oh, shit. Okay, ready?
You ready?
Yeah. Is anybody after?
Don't read that shit.
Is someone after me? Right.
All you have is 20 seconds per slide.
Okay,
I don't know if you know that.
Go. Okay, ready? Okay. I'm only going to read this because what I want to offer is a brief historical perspective on image making using light-sensitive materials. So I wrote on the cover of my little book, The History of Photography in 6 minutes or less. And so I'm just going to go for it. So this gentleman, Albertus Magnus, he was a German, see it's already spinning. Okay, he was a German cleric who first observed the sensitivity of silver nitrate. He noticed that silver darkened when it was exposed to light. This is a Britishman, Thomas Wedgwood. He was working around the late 1700s, early 1800s. He was placing things, objects onto pieces of paper that he had treated with silver nitrate, and he noticed that the silver darkened, but it would continue to darken if he didn't, when he would view it in subdued light, it would darken. So the problem was he couldn't figure out how to keep it from stopping to darken. Nestor Niepce, I have 2 slides of him so I can talk a little slower. So Nestor Niepce was a Frenchman who was working on the same problem. He knew Wedgwood's work, but he had the same problem. He couldn't figure out how to stop the silver from darkening. So what he did is he abandoned silver and started using asphalt, which is a light-sensitive material that occurs naturally. This is an image that he did. It's called the first photograph, but it's actually probably not the first photograph. It's the only known surviving image that Niepce ever made. And it was a view out of his lab's window at his estate in McGraw. It's at the Harry Ransom Center. It's very difficult to see unless you look at the right angle, but it's pretty cool. You should check it out. That was in 1826. Daguerre, who everybody's heard of the daguerreotype, or most people probably have heard of the daguerreotype, another Frenchman started working with Niepce on the problem. They traded notes. They worked on it for several years. Niepce died. Daguerre kept working on it. This is a still life Daguerre shot early on, 1834 probably, 34, 35. The exposure times were painfully long. So still lifes were kind of like a lot of the first subject matter that people were utilizing just for testing. This guy's my favorite, Britishman, Henry Fox Talbot. He was a gentleman scientist, very wealthy, lived in this huge Laycock Abbey outside London. Tinkerer, inventor, scientist. Started dabbling in photography completely. These guys were all working autonomously, which I find fascinating. They didn't know one another's work. They worked very secretively. These are some what Talbot called Talbotypes. So it's a piece of this is a piece of flora that's put on a piece of paper with glass over it, exposed to sunlight, developed. He got a negative image, and then he would contact print his negative image and create a positive image. So really, Talbot's sort of positive negative matrix is kind of like the basis for silver capture up until now. So Talbot's is actually more accurate. This is Hippolyte Bayard. He was another Frenchman working on the problem, also completely autonomously. Daguerre and Talbot both published, one with the Royal Academy of Sciences in London, one with the Royal Society in France, in Paris. And Bayard never published, and therefore he was not recognized really as even a player. So he did that portrait of himself. He called it Portrait of Myself as a Drowned Man, kind of in his frustration. There's Sir John Herschel. He delivered a speech on March 14th, 1839. Can't believe I pulled that out. He's the person that coined the term photography, positive, negative. He is the person that figured out how to stop the fixing process in the way we work now with sodium hyposulfate. That blueprint that you just saw that I'm running behind was a photogram of cyanotype. It's not a silver process. It uses iron salts, ferric ammonium citrate, potassium ferrocyanide. Sunlight exposure gives you that blueprint, really beautiful. So these are early photograms. So the idea of a photogram is you place an object directly on a sheet of paper, expose it to light, develop it, no camera involved, no negative involved, they're all one of a kind. Those are amazing. Those are 20s, Mahalanaj and Rozak. These are chemical paintings called chemograms. The one on the left is mine. This one here is Frederick Summers, Paracelsus, one of my favorite images ever. That was acrylic paint in between two sheets of acetate, and it forms that sort of torso that's sort of vivisected there. This is a image that my mentor and instructor John Gray did of himself in 1983. Put Vaseline all over his face, pressed the paper up to his face, put it in the developer. Where the Vaseline was on the print, it resisted the developing process for a little while, so you got this beautiful sort of effigy of himself, which I love those images. He did full body ones that are laid down on mural paper. They're beautiful. This is a Talbot photogram of dandelion seeds, and it's printed in verso as a photogravure. The image on the right is a dead cactus leaf that I made using a Xerox machine. I do a lot of Xerox stuff. Really interested in non-sort of silver work as well as silver work. This gentleman's named Chester Carlson. He invented the Xerox machine. That's his first Xerox machine. It's very cool. He's straight from Central Casting. He worked for quite a while. He worked in his apartment in New York City, but his wife complained of how the sulfur smelled so badly, and it was a part of his process. So he moved to his mother-in-law's in Queens, which I actually always thought was really funny as well. And this is his first Xerox. It's done on, they were writing with Indian ink on microscope slides and printing on wax paper, and every test they did, they dated and said where it was. So it was 10/22/38, October 22nd, 38, in Astoria, Queens. That was the first kind of breakthrough. This is Röntgen, one of his first x-rays. It was of his wife. See, I forgot her name, like Beatrice or something. And that's her ringed hand. And once again, you know, if you Googled probably first x-ray, that would come up. But, you know, there was a lot of work that went into it. In fact, the skull one is my self-portrait I did last year. I got my doctor to prescribe me a head series. Seriously, because I wanted an x-ray of my face. Winding down here, this is the first photograph made of Abraham Lincoln. It's a daguerreotype. It was made in 1848. And I kind of sometimes ponder if Wedgwood, and there was another man before Wedgwood named Schultz, a German chemist, had worked together, if they'd all worked together a little bit more and not autonomously, that we could probably have a portrait of Washington maybe. You know, in the 1700s, they were actively trying to solve the problem. And this is my last photograph. Oh, you gotta be kidding. Did everybody see it? Yes. Okay, it was the first digital image ever made, and it was in 1972. And if you look up first digital image, it'll say some guy at Kodak did it, but it was not on a CCD chip. So John Thompson, it was a beautiful photograph of his wife. In 1972, he developed a CCD chip. The image is a couple of kilobytes. It's very, very small. It's really beautiful. I wanted to read one quick factoid. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay, good. This is, I find very interesting. I don't need to read this, but I'm going to put it in front of my eyes here just because there's some. So I'm the guy in history class that like remembered every date. Like I loved it. No one else. I was the only guy. I sat in the front. History was my thing. So what I wanted to talk about really quickly is the idea that we live in the most photographed time in history. I'll give you some facts here really quickly. In 2011, it's estimated that Americans took 80 billion photographs. By 2015, 105 billion. And so we live in this incredibly photographed time, and yet I feel like we're creating one of the most fleeting archives in the whole history of photography, because nothing is being printed. It's all living in the ether. It's difficult enough for a photographer to maintain an archive, a digital archive. We're constantly having to update the equipment to stay relevant to the stuff that's being manufactured. So make prints, you know, leave something behind, you know, make prints. Anyway, thanks.